Okay, I call this meeting of the JMRL Board Policy Committee to order. And I welcome our old members who is not here permanently. I don't think she wants to be. And our new member, Janelle Lynch, as well as everyone else. I thought I would say just a very few words, since we have somebody joining us, about the general scope and purpose of the committee and how we kind of generally operate. This committee the purpose is to review and recommend policies that are then potentially adopted by the full board. So we don't create policy ourselves, but usually we work things into a pretty final shape, and usually they end up getting adopted by the board, partly because half the board is already on this committee, so it's sort of pre-qualified, let's say. Each policy is reviewed on a regular schedule, and currently that is every 10 years it gets brought up again for review. So it's an automatic thing. There's some talk about changing that schedule on a per policy basis. That some might be more frequent than 10 years, but so far we haven't put that into place. But the policy that we're focusing on today, notary services, is one that was last reviewed, I believe, 10 years ago, and that's why we're looking at this particular month. From time to time, other things come up from the standpoint of the library that would be useful to review outside of that 10-year period, and so sometimes those come up sort of ad hoc. Not very often, but sometimes. To me, the goal of a policy, there's a couple of, I've been doing this in this role for a couple of years. And I think if I'm counting the years properly, I think this will be my last fiscal year in this role, partly because at the end of this year, I'll be restarting the 10-year things I saw 10 years ago. And I'm not very interested in doing that. So that's also partly why I'm sort of sharing some thoughts about scope and purpose. But we're always, to my mind, we always want to, it's always striking a balance between several criteria or stakeholders. One is the dividing line between broad policy and outcomes and goals, which is really the purpose of the board as a whole. And then on the other side of that line are operational details, just sort of the day-to-day running the library, which is the responsibility of staff. At the same time, the policy manual does it operates as a tool sometimes for staff itself. So we have a conduct policy, for example, that I understand that staff, if they need to explain to some boundaries to a patron, they can say, it has a lot of weight to say, here's a policy that the whole board has agreed on. It's a guiding document for this. So it might have some procedural things like you can't do this for certain times, but there might be reasons to put some of those into a policy sometimes when we need to communicate something to the public. So there's always the audience for these policies in my mind are, one, it's high level instructions to the staff, meaning David and people that report to him. Here's things you must accomplish in terms of goals. Here's things you must not do. So there's those high level guidelines, but also another stakeholder is the public. How do I do this, and what can I expect when I'm interacting with the library? That's one way I think about it, is we want that to be clear to the public at all times, and sometimes a policy is a good place for that. And then, as I mentioned, a tool for staff. Sometimes we involve staff in all of these meetings because we need a perspective from your day-to-day operation of the library, how is this policy going to impact you? And is it workable, or are there things that as a staff level that we don't kind of experience at the board level, that, hey, this would be a problem for things we do day to day, or, hey, we would be great if we had support in policy for this kind of practice that we want to carry out. So those are just sort of broad level comments about kind of scope and purpose and how I see some of the trade-offs that we're in and the tightropes that we're trying to navigate between with some of these stakeholders. Any comments, thoughts, questions on any of that?
Any volunteers to be chair when Mike steps down after 10 years?
Well, you can think about it for a while. The other thing I'll mention is just the general workflow that I think we've sort of converged on over the course of this couple of years, and we'll be doing it today. So my goal for today with the notary services is we've done a lot of background research and saw a background presentation. My goal for today would be to come with a consensus, at least within this committee, list of sort of bullet points or high level requirements that we want to see in a policy. And so that's usually, I think that's worked well to have that be the first stage of working with the policy that's being reviewed. Then behind the scenes, some sausage gets made, and either through some combination of volunteers, a draft policy language gets put together that reflects all of those bullet points. So at our next meeting, I would hope to have that in place. So it's an actual language starting point that we'd all look at. And then there's kind of wordsmithing based on that. And then usually then that's ready to go we put that into a form that we're ready to recommend to the full board. And depending on the complexity of the policy in question, that may take more than 2 cycles, but often I think we're able to get through it in 2, which I hope we will with this one. Okay, before we actually look at notary, any other comments, questions, kind of thoughts about the sort of this high level thoughts that I'm sharing?
Just like a summary of the role of policy.
Right.
And I would just note that this is the last of the 10-year policies for this
year, yeah.
Effectively. So there's 2 more policy committee meetings in October and December. We'll finish this one, and then we've got
we have
to talk about reorganizing policy manual potentially.
Yeah, that's a long-term goal that David and I talked about for a couple of years, and I think we're in a better position to maybe do that now than we were probably 5 years ago when we first started talking about it. Okay, so notary, David, I probably should have asked for this in advance, but I think a great starting point would be the questions that the presenters put out on, I think it was the second to last slide. No, just the high level questions that the presentation posed. I thought that was a useful framework to orient. Yeah, there you go. So does JMRL need a policy? We need to state these sort of things. I think we can talk through these and also other high level topics that came up during the presentation, because there was some discussion that has already happened from that.
I think it might be useful to see what our current policy is before we do that.
Right.
So it's only 2 sentences, right?
And it's not dated, actually.
I think the one that I turned into a drive form here has the date on the second page there. Just it got cut off in all the white space. So it was March 2016. Free notary public services are offered at all locations. So there's a lot packed into that first sentence. 1, everything is free, and 2, it's at all locations. Library staff volunteer to provide this service. Please call ahead of your visit to check availability. In providing this service, library staff follow the Code of Virginia. So that's all we're working with right there. And here, I think, is what, Mike, you were referring to. Does JMRL need a notary policy?
Okay, so even ahead of that, do we want to provide notary services as a library system? I think the answer seemed to be yes. That I sort of raised that question in the meeting. So yes. So if we're going to do that, I think we need a notary. I think, like our other major service groups, we need some kind of policy, and we can discuss how detailed it is. That just, again, tells people what to expect. Yes, there's some form of notary services, and this is how you interface with them. So then we get into the real nitty gritty, which is, do we as a board require that staff offer service at all locations? And if so, is it free? And then we get into some of these other nitty gritty. I have some thoughts, but I'll open it up for discussion from your own opinions or what you felt like you heard at last month's meeting.
And Brittany is also on the call. So we have 3 notary experts.
Yes, great.
here.
I mean, I'll start. I just thought, I mean, I was looking more at these, the survey that is, it was interesting that in the question of, in your opinion, are notary services a core library service for our community? Not everybody that, I mean, almost like 50% said no, it's not. So I don't think it's a given that we have a notary policy. I think we should personally. But I thought it was interesting that there's a difference of opinion about that fundamental issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that was a wording thing in the question too. I think the question maybe would have been, or another version of that would have been, should JMRL offer notary services? You know, because saying it's a core library service versus doesn't necessarily mean somebody's saying, I don't think we should do it.
Yeah.
They're just saying it's not our core mission and value. And we talk a lot about mission creep and making sure that we're sticking to our core mission and value. So if this isn't one of them, then I think it would require for staff, for myself, it would require the board saying no more notaries for us to stop doing notaries. So whether there should be a policy one way or the other, the policy would just be we don't do notaries.
And I think we've been doing it for so long that, you know, we saw when I think it became news in Louisa whenever you were going to offer it on Saturdays. It became, so, I mean, we've been offering notary services for 20 years at least. So to stop would create a real hardship deficit, whatever, in some of our communities because it's such a highly used service.
And other institutions that traditionally were providing those are no longer for whatever reason. And I think from these examples that you sent out, it looks like all, you know, really probably all libraries provide some sort of notary service, or the ones.
Well, that was a self-selected group of only 5 policies that from the state library of other systems that have a policy. So those are ones. We didn't see an example of a policy like you just suggested where somebody has a policy that we don't have notary service.
I know of at least, who told me the other day, I think Henrico County does not offer notaries. So there's at least a few other major library systems that don't.
Does Rappahannock? I mean,
oh, here, Brittany used to work at Central Rappahannock. She can tell us. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, Central Rappahannock definitely offers notary service, and they're every bit as busy as we are with that. As a notary who does about 20 to 40 notarizations a month easily, I definitely think we should continue offering notary
You might need
services.
to-
Yeah, we can't hear you, Brittany.
Okay,
Hear
hang on.
you. We're trying to adjust it on this end, but you might need to repeat everything.
Is that better? Can you hear me
Yes.
now? Okay. Like I was saying, Central Rappahannock is every bit as busy with notarizations as we are. And as somebody who does 20 to 40 notarizations a month easily, I would say we definitely need to continue the service. But I will say I was one of the notaries who did not say I think it's a core service, because it's kind of just an extra additive thing we can provide the public that is necessary to them, but it's not necessarily part of our mission to me. I do it to help. So I'm happy to continue doing that. And I do think we should provide it. But to me, I don't necessarily think it's a core service.
I mean, I said it wasn't a core service.
But yeah. There's most of the no's, right? But it's also the busiest notaries that we have.
And another way that could have been questioned, so I'm thinking of like, it could have been a follow-up question, like, is it core to the community? Or is it, you know, like, I feel like the wording of that could have been a little different because, yes, working here, like, no, servicing reading materials and that sort of thing, that's the core. But if you think about, is it core to the community and its necessity? Speaking to the volume of which they, you know, they actually did.
I think that got surfaced in the board's conversation a little bit after the continuing ed last month. I think maybe it was Peter or Martha. Somebody said, you know, this is clearly something that people need, that we're filling in a gap
in the community.
But we also have to be careful about, you know, there's a lot of gaps in the community.
Right. Filling all those needs, right?
Yes.
I mean, oh,
don't
go ahead.
mind offering the service. I think it brings people into the library that don't otherwise use the library, that then sometimes hear and learn about other library services. Largely, probably, they don't. They come in because they need something notarized, and I'm looking at you because you're the busiest notary we got.
Yeah, I see that a lot of the folks that come in that need notary services don't utilize the library. They come in, they get their notary done, and they leave. A lot.
And when we talk about outreach and trying to reach non-library users, we're reaching them. Now, whether or not they're then becoming library users is a different question.
I mean, I would say even if someone is not using it, there is a halo effect or a goodwill that's going to attach. And even non-users of the library pay taxes, which is where all of this comes from. So it doesn't hurt, all things being equal, to have a good goodwill in the community.
I'll say I have 3 that I did last week that stand out to me. One was a family came in to have something notarized, and they could hear the program going on down in the Swanson room. And they said they usually go to Gordon Avenue. But I said, why don't you it was Friday morning. I said, why don't you go down and take a peek and see what's going on in the Swanson room? I saw them 40 minutes later down in the children's room. So they came in for a notary, but they stayed. The older couple that I did that asked about you, David, they're like regular library users. The gentleman it was a paper to have a estate type of thing taken care of. And I recognized him when it came in. His wife asked about David. Like they are regular library users. But then I also had a woman come in whose daughter is going to college in Colorado, and she needed a piece of paper signed for her daughter to get a parking permit, saying that it's her vehicle, but her daughter's in Colorado at university. And then last week with UVA coming, we do get a lot of people that are they're trying to settle something, and they're from out of town, and they end up at the library, and they're always grateful. And thank us. And, that's where we leave it.
Go ahead, Brittany.
I mean, Krista just summed it up for me perfectly. Like, we see a lot of different type of traffic with patrons getting notarizations. We do get a lot of repeat customers who are regular library users. We do get people that are just moving to the area and they don't know where else to go for a notarization. And then you have the opportunity to talk about getting a library card and all the programs and stuff like that. But you also do have people that are just trying to settle like an out of state, property situation with their parents who lived here. And it's just, a one-off thing. So I like the fact we're able to help people in different ways. Just making sure that everything else that we do is also covered. That can be the tricky part sometimes. So it's just the balance. And I think we kind of alluded to that in the presentation that we did is, it can be hard to balance desk coverage with doing all of the notarization. So you just try to work your best to meet the need and look at the workflow for the day.
And I would say the opposite of that halo effect is that if you're offering something that is so used and appreciated, and then you remove it,
right,
you're talking about a negative reaction. So I think there better be a good reason. And I could see that reason, if we got into a funding crunch at JMRL and we had to prioritize, we don't have enough staff to do all these things. Like this would certainly be a service that we would look at as something that's not core to our mission, but it's something we do rely on.
Would part of that be mitigated by having certain hours that are available,
yeah.
and appointments?
Appointment only.
That's what I was going to say. I think this is really an important conversation, that it's not necessarily a core value. So I think it helps us, continue on with notary services, but with, really responsible parameters, guardrails on it.
And it's just maybe something that's worth unearthing in a policy that says the board recognizes that this is not a core library service, but
A necessary community service.
yeah, I don't know if that's.
I don't know if I would make that.
Restrict, we can't make it reasonable for the staff for sure.
To me, where that might land, the word core service is a little bit of semantics, I think, and maybe I think it's useful within this conversation to guide, like, priorities, but I don't think on the public, I don't think there's anywhere else where it says something is or is not a core library service. So I think in terms of that wording, not sure of the use of it in the policy. I think where it would land is in the policy, it could say something like, the words limited or within availability hours or as available, or those sorts of things would sort of convey that you can't necessarily expect 24/7 access to notary. And that would be, to me, maybe more of a high level way of telling staff how to handle that. To me,
Appointments are required or requested,
yeah,
and other times will be as a notary is available.
something like that, yeah. And we'll have to talk about I think we can talk about in terms of bullet points, what outcome we want to see, and then we can talk about what language is the right level of specificity once we wordsmith. To me, where this is probably going is I could envision some guaranteed hours with by appointment. So there's this many appointments available at Central, and then in advance that's the limit or the guardrails on how much resources we're able to put into this service. So it'd be like a mini schedule within the opening schedule. Then there could also be known walk-in hours scheduled as well. So for people who can't, but again, that's going to be the walk-in hour is 2 to 3 or 5 to 6 to 7 p.m. And if 10 people got there in front of you and you're number 11, we told you in advance that that's when it's available. I mean, these are just, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that would be complicated, especially in places where there's only one notary. Like,
Yeah.
for example, Gordon Avenue Library, if you say, if we're gonna offer this service during these times every single week, and then someone is sick or they're on vacation or someone else is sick and they have to cover the desks for them, I think we don't quite have the capacity to go to that level of
I think you
specificity.
a dedicated notary in order to do that appointment.
Yeah.
Don't, like every person who's notarizing is doing it between every other duty that they
Well,
have.
that's partly where I'm going is if we wanted to,
Yeah.
well, if we say this is an important service and we end up sort of upgrading that volunteer aspect of it because we think it's important to, these are just control measures that would help you plan. So you might say, okay, so-and-so is going to be at Gordon now from 3 to 5 on Wednesday, and that's going to be in addition to your normal staffing. I mean, that's one thing that came out to me from the staff surveys is that just the unpredictable nature of sort of matching the demand to the available resources at given times can really play a little bit of havoc with people's actual normal job responsibilities. I'm seeing some nods. So if you put some additional structure on top of that, that might help with some of that unpredictability. But again, these are operational techniques that I'm throwing out.
I mean, one thing that's clear to me is that whatever the board ends up with, there's no existing notary procedure for staff, so there needs to be an associated procedure. Like we did when the board reviewed the meeting room policy last year, the year before, we had to rewrite all the meeting room procedures for here's how staff manage what the board has asked for.
Right, and Chris, I know you have your hand raised, but just where I'm going with some of this kind of conversations, I think those go hand in hand is we're going to kind of say, hey, let's agree on what we should expect in terms of what we can provide and how that would work in the structure. And then we would sort of backfill the language in the policy to give the public the right impression about how that kind of works.
I'm not sure some of that is going to work operationally.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Couple things. You mentioned the fund, the funders and what do the fund. I don't know that our jurisdictions have any clue how much notary service we provide. I do know that the city of Charlottesville has the city, the county, all these organizations, they have notaries, but that work there, but they don't offer the service to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the reason that our service has become so much more important. And Brittany points out there that we get referrals from the courthouse, from the banks, all these places that used to offer notary services don't. So we've become the default. Like, I don't know what's happened in the last 20 years, and I've been a notary for 20 years, but it has definitely increased, by volumes and volumes. So we have become that place. And I was kind of thinking about how the city, in City Hall, they offer a DMV select thing. And it's almost like the same, like every once in a while, the DMV will offer their services through City Hall. Well, we are now we're the notary service because all of these other organizations don't have free notary
Do you
service.
do the notaries for the registrars?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
So
Petitions. So that's another thing. If the voter, Brittany and I talked about this recently because I did 30 petitions to get someone on the ballot. And if he had to pay $10 for each petition that I
you have
stamped,
to do each petition.
each petition. So the voter registration office should have, in my opinion, a notary available to have those notarized for free. Because if we were to decide to charge this guy, it would limit who could be on the ballot because you'd have to pay for all of those petitions. So this guy, I did probably 50 for him within 2 weeks. Now he did call and he made an appointment and it took at least 2 hours of my time, but I knew he was coming. But so that's what got me thinking, why doesn't the voter registration office have or does somebody in the jurisdictions need to provide notaries for these ballot
Especially
petitions?
for that.
Yeah, so
specific
anyway, and procedures, yes, I wrote down, offer services, yes, policy, yes, and my next thing was procedure ? Because we don't have procedures, although Brittany has been collecting information from each branch by literally calling them up and trying to find out what happens at each location. So she's already got a start on that document.
I know Louise is well aware because we talk to Christian, we talk to the administrator and the budget office every year about this. And that's how we found out that they're offering service too. It's just not as widely adopted and used.
And what do you do about Saturdays and evenings, which comes up very frequently also, because if someone works Monday through Friday, does that mean they don't get notary service then? Or they have to go to the UPS and pay for it?
Brittany.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed an uptick in notary requests since the beginning of COVID. And I think we're seeing this, uptick in requests in general because a lot of places let their seals lapse during that period, which is, understandable for many reasons, workflow, whatever. But, you're going to have different requests that come up. And I think it's also up to the notary to kind of see what they're comfortable with doing and state that to the patron too. So as I'm gathering this information about the procedures, we're talking about what are we seeing the most? I see a lot of will and power of attorney, for example, and it's also cyclical. So right around the holidays, I'm doing a lot of those. Right now, we're doing shared housing documents. I just did a religious exemption form this morning, for example. So just that different type of thing, just kind of being prepared for that different workflow. But we are very clear in trying to make, patrons understand they really should make an appointment. And the policy, like I said in the chat, states, please call ahead. So I think that's the most clarity we're going to be able to give patrons personally. If we put hours on the webpage or something like that, and then we can't follow through on those hours for whatever reason, that might cause further customer service issues. So
I think the biggest customer service issue that we're seeing is that we do have branches that require appointments, and they're constantly having people come in and then get turned away. And I field a lot of complaints about that. That the expectation is that you have a notary, I can walk in and get something notarized, because usually most services at the library, you can just walk in and make it happen. And we've tried to do that. So tell us about your experience as the most volume there.
So most of our notaries are walk-ins, even though we have a sign there. Well, our sign just say Notary Public. It doesn't say by appointment. So what we've been trying to do when folks call in is to schedule a time for them to come in. But so many come in without an appointment. And then we just kind of try to juggle schedules around to make this happen. I had a couple this morning that came in. They did make an appointment, and they said that the bank wouldn't notarize their document with a mortgage. And so I had to notarize it for them. And I was looking at some of the policies here, and this is something that maybe we could start thinking about. We do closings, which is a big thing. And just thinking that if those folks went to a lawyer, they would be paying up to, $300-400 for a closing. And they come in and we are doing it. And it could be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how much. So we may want to think about maybe limiting some documents that we can notarize. Like, okay, no longer can do like
Real estate.
real estate
Yeah,
and
I
stuff
would
like
take
that.
out.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous area.
Yeah, and there's definitely a situation where we have been taken advantage of. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but lawyers bringing their clients in for us to do the notary part of a document that they
Yeah.
charge that client to prepare,
Right.
right? But they don't have a note, they can't notarize their own document and they don't have a notary on staff. So, then the problem becomes that screening of what, we're already having this with the form, what kind of document is it? Does it need witnesses? Sometimes they don't even know. Like, how many times do we need to press that stamp down? They don't know. They'll say 3 to 5. We don't, they don't even know. So I hear what you're saying. And that's the only time I get a little bit like, you mean to tell me you charge this person to prepare this document, but someone's making money.
Right.
Not
Not us.
lawyer, yeah, who's making money, not us. Right. And you're providing free service. Yeah. Bless you.
I would really recommend taking out the real estate.
And then I want to
Somebody's buying a house and they're coming to you and you get a free notary system.
Well, and a lot of times it's remote, like they're selling their house in California or Vermont or wherever. And so the document needs to be notarized locally and mailed back in a FedEx envelope, and we're the intermediaries. You said you have a sign on the door, like you literally have like a notary public sign on the door.
Yeah.
We don't advertise that. Do we? I don't think we have a sign anymore. I don't think so. Yeah. Because you would want to put like by appointment.
I guess my only concern in that is putting staff in the position where they have to make a determination.
What is it?
And they would, largely my experience with frontline staff is that they would prefer if it's cut and dry. Like, yes, we're notarizing, or no, we're not notarizing. Rather than like, okay, well, this is that. So I don't mind doing that. But it puts the onus on the staff to figure it out.
I think it.
I thought some of them had in the other policies, like you could have up to 3 notary days, something like that. I mean, if you were counting it stamp by stamp, you would never be able to do all those petitions.
Right.
But that would limit, like, the real estate documents usually are like, I don't know, 10 or 15 notarizations,
Per individual.
Almost all of it, except for Richmond, it doesn't have.
Go ahead, Brittany.
They all have limits.
I think some of the difficulty we're seeing with like real estate documents or wills, power of attorney, stuff like that some notaries may not be comfortable notarizing is they're getting patrons that have already been turned away from 2 different places before they get to us. And like, if you're going to your bank for something to be notarized, a lot of the times the banks won't do specific documents for that patron. Unless they're a client, and even then there's only like, they won't do wills, for example. So I agree with limiting possibly, for sure, when it comes to real estate and stuff like that, but you might put staff in a difficult position regardless, because then they're going to have to turn down a patron that's already been turned down like twice before. For an out-of-state document, like what Krista was talking about, we frequently do get people trying to settle like their parents' house from out of state. So it's a kind of a gray area, and my experience with frontline staff is also they like things cut and dry. So this is a tricky one.
Could possibly a combination of thoughts. You require an appointment for a specific type, like the real estate documents. Even if someone called that day and you have 2 o'clock or something. And the business model I'm thinking about around this is urgent care, private urgent cares. You can make appointments for sports physicals, or you can just show up and get them done. But if you show up to just get it done and you don't have an appointment, if somebody walks in and has an appointment, they kind of go before you. it's not on their websites, but it's just a thing when you walk in, you kind of figure out, like that kind of model, like it's known to show up because it's urgent care. It's like the last resort, but they do offer options of appointments for certain things, that are standard.
Yeah, and that happened to me last week where someone was downstairs and wanted something notarized, but they didn't have an appointment. And I said, well, I have someone coming in at 11:30. So when I'm finished with the 11:30 appointment,
Then I
I'll let
can
you
take
know, then I can take them. And I know you have that happen too.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, depending on where you do your notary, like I do most of mine upstairs out of the public area in the admin office table. But if you're downstairs, Brittany does them downstairs in the reading area, and they see that you're there and you're already doing it, like they're next in line type of
You
thing.
described that last month, right? Like
Yeah.
line showed up.
Yeah. It's hard to say no, when they're already lined up.
Brittany says they're already doing that at Central.
Mhm.
So I guess my question here is like, how prescriptive does the board want to be about telling staff how to manage this? This is kind of always the balance on the
I
policy
think
committee.
a thing that has to be considered too is that, we are talking from a knowledge base about notary services, some sort of notary. But I think a lot of people walk into a situation and all of a sudden they're told, you have to get this notarized.
We don't know.
And
Yeah.
So we need to make certain that we have some degree of flexibility within that person who's been blindsided by this need for.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, and mostly they're coming in, like Krista described last month for the board, they'll come in and you'll say to them, because the notary can only offer really 5 services. You'll say, which of these 5 do you need? And they'll say, I have no idea. They'll ask, and staff has to say, well, I can describe them to you, but I can't make it.
You can't practice law. Because the lawyer's the one to decide which type of notarization it's supposed to be. And frequently, right, there's no stamp on there
Sometimes
already.
the document guides it, it's very clear.
So, and I show them, like, it'll either be this or this, choose. Like, they choose so that I can just stamp it.
So your question, how prescriptive does
Yeah.
the board want to be, from my perspective, not very prescriptive. I think it sounds like we want to provide the service. So I think I've prescribed that to you, or I'm not going to prescribe not to do it,
Yeah.
In the way you described. I want the policy to broadly to communicate to the public what they can expect. So it might say something like by appointment or as available, or something that's going to clue them in to the fact that it's not a 24/7, if that's where we ran. And then I would envision a policy of how you're actually going to implement this. And I would envision a public sort of handout landing page that explains what you need to know operationally from the public.
And you've looked at the notary page on the website. There is.
So it would be
Yeah.
something like that, but including any new operational wrinkles that, come out of this. Big picture to me, it seems like we have a service that's popular and benefits the library in various ways, and we want to offer. Big picture, it seems like there's a demand supply mismatch. There's a lot of demand for this and limited supply. So how do you fix that? You either increase the supply somehow, or you manage the demand by adding friction into the system, which makes it harder just like the bank has said, well, yeah, you'd still want it to be free, but you might have to go through some trouble to do it, so that at some point that paying $10 somewhere else might look attractive or might start to equal out. And that's just, I don't like putting in speed bumps in people's way, but if there's a speed bump anyways, because we have more demand than supply, then this would be a way to manage expectations about how, what friction. I'd rather encounter a known friction up front than an unknown friction, that I didn't expect. So all those comments about hours and guarantees and so forth would not be in a policy. To me, it was just suggestions for me in terms of what I'm reading about the unpredictability factor, in terms of the resource matching and some brainstorms about how you might want to address that.
The service that it reminds me of is our interlibrary loan service, which when I first started at JMRL was free and got used all the time. And people would request things that, when I worked at Gordon Avenue, they would request things that would be at Clemens. And I would say to them like, oh, this is available. down the street and I don't want to deal with parking. Like, let's just do an interlibrary loan. Then it would come from Washington State, and eventually the library board decided to put a fee in place. It's a $3 fee. Part of that was because of the cost of postage, you couldn't keep up, but part of it was just adding a speed bump there. And that it worked to kind of bring those now we have other factors involved there, like the free ILL at UVA now, things like that. But it slowed down the rate, which was overwhelming the service.
I mean, I think the policy can have availability, a broad availability. And certain, I mean, there's IDs people have to have.
You can't notarize without an ID.
I
Yeah.
mean, some of these policies that you sent out, some say that should be in our policy for sure. It's not in now.
I think staff would like the one probably about bring your own witnesses.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a problem. People show up and they need to sign, but they need.
The public needs to know the parameters of it.
I think it's identifying which one of those that we can universally apply.
Yeah.
Because it's a very different scenario. Yeah.
Some of these policies.
And let's just say, that's the other thing that I kind of want to mention, and Brittany, I know will agree with this. At Central, we notarize things that other notaries are uncertain or uncomfortable or aren't sure about. And I'm kind of thinking about this almost like MRBS, like when we make meeting room reservations. People try to come to Northside to get a room. Rooms are all booked. So where do they end up? At another branch, right? And sometimes with notary service, it's the same thing. They try to come to one branch and either the notaries aren't there or the notaries, it's the documents in Spanish, and we don't have to understand the document. The person signing the document has to understand the document, and we need to know what kind of document it is to write in our record book. This was a power of attorney or a property transfer or whatever. But we don't have to read it. They need to know they know what it is that we're notarizing. But some notaries, as a notary, if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to notarize the document, regardless of, which is a little tricky because you don't want to be accused of not being consistent across the board, turning away some people. And we did have a notary at one point in time, way back when, that was uncomfortable with a certain type of permit, that they just felt uncomfortable. They just didn't want to notarize it because they didn't believe in it and they didn't want to notarize it. And it's like, well, you can't pick and choose which things you're going to notarize based on your personal moral, convictions. You kind of have to be consistent. As long as the person has the ID, and this was a form, like a state form. It wasn't like there was any ambiguity about what the document was about. So anyway, I don't know if there's a way, and this is something we could talk about, I guess, at Central a little bit, but we do get, there are times when there aren't any notaries anywhere else. They all end up at Central. They get referred to us.
Sometimes we used to see this in the past, and folks that come in that English isn't their first language, they cannot communicate with us at all, and they would have a translator. And so my notaries were a little hesitant about notarizing it because they said that I should be able to communicate with the person on the other end, ask them, do you know what you're signing? Then if they don't understand what you're saying. And one of my notaries said that the translator, she spoke to the translator, and the translator relayed a message to the person, which this notary knew a little bit of Spanish. And she said what the lady told her wasn't what she had said.
Yeah.
And so I think she ended up not notarizing it.
And I think that was in one of the sample policies also, was that, that's what translates.
And that does bring up that, so JMRL has a broad insurance that covers notarizations, but one staff hesitancy about volunteering for this, despite, their desire to help people, and maybe even the availability that they might have, is that they're concerned that later on they might have to go to a court of law and swear to something like this, which is what you're doing. That's why you're there, to be that witness later in a court of law. But I'm interested in tackling that question about volunteering and all locations. to get this committee's thoughts on those, because from looking at the big questions, it looks like the only one we've answered is number one. Right. We were wishy-washy on that, but. So for number two, is it gonna be free? And to me, this is a board level decision. And are we gonna require it at every location? Because currently, we do not require any staff to become notaries. It is, I believe, we checked with our trainer, we could do that. JMRL could say, it's part of your job description that you need to be a notary. Not certainly be a popular thing to do, but I think that decision impacts what this overall policy is gonna say.
To that supply side point, I'm very open to some additional incentives. I think probably go a long way, and recognize that these folks are, as far as I can tell, they have a full-time job, but then this notary stuff is every hour you spend on notary is an hour you can't do your full-time job, and you're not getting compensated in any different way for that. So I would be interested in, if we think we can work it out, which seems workable to me, at a supply side boost for that. I would be pretty interested in, if no staff volunteer to be a notary at a location, operationally, I would hope that maybe we could solve that by send so-and-so over to such and such location for at least 2 hours on Saturday, and then it's available. At least we can say for those people, there is a way to have it happen.
So
again,
you would be in favor of the overall policy that it's available at all locations
to some limited extent, at least, yeah.
as available.
I would.
And what is it now? Do we have notaries?
We currently do, yes.
Not
It's
every
not a-
hour
but
a
it's
library
not
is
a
open
policy.
though.
It is in the policy that it's Mike, to your solution there, where we're gonna send somebody over, again, all these people have other full-time jobs,
So it would fall down to you, is you have to figure it out in terms of budgeting and resources and staffing and make it happen.
and we're pretty thinly stretched across the
I
board.
understand.
I will say, Mike, people do say, like, can I pay you? And I say, I'm being paid. Like I am, I'm at work when I'm doing this. I am being paid, and your tax dollars pay for library services.
Also,
So therefore,
they can make a donation. That's usually.
exactly. You can join the Friends of the Library. You can make a donation.
I certainly don't mind getting income from somebody who wants to hand me money, and is grateful for a value that they've received.
But as a policy, it should be free. I think.
Yeah,
As a
agreed.
policy, it should be free. Requiring it at all locations then starts to be, a core service. And we're now getting, does this follow, we've discussed this is not a core service.
I was thinking about when we were talking about that core services, I looked up the makerspace policy we just did, because that to me is something that's, a similar realm here and is not available. And the language there says, it's available as resources are available.
I suppose it's true if you system-wide, we do have a system, and all branches are not convenient to all people in the region, but they're at least accessible. You could get there, so sure.
And they're not, and all our branches don't have the same services.
Right.
Or the same programs or anything.
Well, it's hours and staffing. Hours and staffing, yeah. So Central, we have evening hours, we have Saturday, we even have Sunday hours available, where other branches have maybe 2 evenings a week and a few hours on Saturday or something. So it could be by number of hours the building is open, or by number of notaries.
Scottsville is open more hours than almost anybody except for Central and Northside. But, they've only got a full-time staff members. They've only got one notary. I mean, in terms of the percentage of time that a notary is available, it's
So the
very small.
Availability, and that could change. It could be, because of recognition of stretched resources, that is available as resources.
I think that would be my druthers, probably, to say that it's not required in
Not
every.
require every.
So, to that point, David, given what in some ways, this is a sort of a system-wide review, and via the survey, we're sort of unearthing or putting some attention on to the demand and supply matchup. you were designing, what can we do? And as you hinted at, the sort of the little operational brainstorms I'm throwing out aren't policy level.
Right.
They're just sort of an exploring of, if we did have various policies, how might you end up implementing them? But what would you like to see here if we think of this as a tool to put in place what you would envision is realistic in terms of our service availability and the demand?
I think it would remain very high level with some prescriptions that we can say system-wide, such as you have to bring your own witnesses and maybe laying out some parameters, like here's what a notary is. And I think we would remove the requires at every branch. I have a personal feeling about this, which my staff do not agree with, which is that we should require a library card for this service. To me, that does not seem like too much of a barrier to ask somebody to fill out this form and join the library in order to make use of this free library service. We ask them to do that for almost every other service that we offer, but the staff that are notaries are I don't know, what was the final breakdown in the survey about that?
That was split.
About 50-50.
Yeah.
5 yes, 12 no, so not exactly 50-50.
And then again, that was because of time.
They thought that that was a barrier to access for people. Now, we do
You
have
can
a
jump through some hoops.
we have a class of card that allows you to use some in-house resources so that we wouldn't necessarily have to charge the person the out-of-area fee if they don't, because some percentage of our notaries don't live in Charlottesville, Albemarle, Queen Louisa, or Nelson. We have a class of card that allows them to use the computer or to use a meeting room. They just can't take stuff out of the library, basically. So we could do it without being a cost to the patron. If that's a concern for the board, it would still be free, but it would require them to take that step.
Then you got all those people that come in that from out of state or UVA that just need a.
Great. Let's get them library cards.
Well,
So what,
to me,
for one use.
Right.
well, to me, this is a possible mechanism to add some friction for those out-of-staters who don't pay taxes and ultimately fund the library. Is we could say, not only do you have to have a card, but hey, we have a policy about out-of-area, so you have to have an out-of-area card. And that's one place to add friction and maybe land the impact of that speed bump.
Potentially,
On people
I'll
who
warn
aren't-
you, this is not a popular
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Written staff do not think that this is a good idea. I've been talking about this for a few
Is it from the standpoint of the administrative overhead of just the time requirement to do that, or is it more of
I think
the?
it's a barrier. They consider it to be a barrier to access.
And is it okay to have an barrier to access that falls differently on people?
Yeah, I think the concern also
jurisdictions that
is
people
for
are-
people that live within our jurisdiction, but for whatever reason can't get a library card. So that would be, and we have mechanisms to deal with all this, but somebody who doesn't have a permanent address. Basically, like that's probably the number one thing, if somebody is unhoused and they're trying to use the library. And we do have mechanisms for getting cards for those folks, but they certainly don't have a $30 to spend on the library.
Or an ID with that.
Or an ID. ID is a big barrier for
I
some
mean, they have to have
folks.
an ID to be notarized, but does their ID have the address of where they're trying to get the card for, and then you have a whole other administrative process going on. The out of area fee is only it's $30, which is basically three.
I mean, I'd just rather have them pay the $30 than make them go through the hoops to get a card
Yeah.
that they're never gonna use. I had one I did last week for, I'll be as generic as possible, but it was like a pet insurance and the pet had died. And in order to collect the insurance, this is a big pet. I had to notarize their signature on the insurance claim for this big animal that died that they had insured. And they were not from our area. But I bet you if they had to pay $30, because they certainly paid more than that for insurance for this pet and the upkeep of this pet, that they would have probably paid the $30. I'd just rather have them pay $30.
Janelle, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, in some of the things we're listing, like the IDs and things that are required, is that already listed in the state of Virginia notary policy? Because that is in our policy. So some things we may not need to reiterate,
But they don't
Yeah.
read the policy, so
Yeah.
we need to spell out a couple things probably.
That's a good point, and it's something that this group talks about a lot.
Yeah.
If it is the law, and sometimes we'll put something in there that we know is in the other source, just to make it.
So it's clean it out there, it's visual. Yeah.
I will say, Krista, it's been a goal of the library system to increase card registration for a long time.
But
And
do
this is a
those
service
ones
that we're
one-off?
providing.
Yes.
And how is that different from asking somebody to get one for a meeting room?
We get zero benefit from that. From the notary, we can at least make them pay.
We get the benefit of there's one more card
That's a whole
in our database, when we're reporting how many people are using the library. Like we talked about this briefly, Mike made the same point, and it's like, well, somebody could come in, you come in, you bring your kid in, you make a card, you get something, you never come back. They're still using the library. Again, not popular, but it's my strong opinion.
Can we just charge the out of area people for the notary and not go through the process of making them a card? Like
And the
you're
board-
in our
the board could
service area,
certainly-
it's free. If you're not, it
Yeah.
costs $10 a stamp.
You could say that. You could say it's free if you have a card, including the out of area card with the fee, but it's $10 if you don't have a card. And then people that adds a little bit of friction, but B, they can make a determination on their own. Do I want
Where am I gonna use
to
it?
jump through that hoop, or do I just want to pay the $10?
Ophelia, what do you think of that?
I actually like that, to charge out of area folks,
Unless they have a card.
unless they have a card, yes. Because they're getting a deal. Person I notarized today, no, one last week, they were from, I don't know, California or something. They were here doing something. And so this, I can go through my notary book and I can probably pinpoint every other entry of someone that's not in my local area that I'm notarizing.
Yeah, we did that study 2 years ago, and it wasn't as many as I was expecting, but it was definitely some.
Just to be clear, my brainstorm, and obviously it can be tweaked, was even if you're in area but you don't have a card, you have the choice, either sign up for a card
Yeah,
today
free for card holders.
or just pay $10 and go on your way.
That would at
like
least
that.
increase real cardholders in our
Yeah,
system.
what do you think?
No, I
Yeah.
like that free for cardholders, $10 for non.
So we're running out of time on
Yeah.
today's meeting, and then maybe all we got through was. Are we looking at maybe talking about this again in October?
We're definitely talking it again in October. The question is, do we have some kind of
Some
language to look at or not?
We could put together some language just from what we've talked about.
I think we hit.
I mean, I think it's.
I think the language, may not cover all of this. If we, for example, the supply side, I think would not be. I think the supply side is not going to end up in the policy necessarily. I don't know if we wanted to have an incentive, where would we put that?
I think it would just be a board directive.
Yeah, it wouldn't have to be a
It was
policy.
when the board votes on the budget, they're voting it that as part of the.
Yeah.
In this survey, 12, there are 15 people that took the survey. 12 out of 15 said it does not need to be at every JMRL.
Yeah, I think,
I think they say that it's available as resources.
I would prefer that too, because we can also get into a situation like right now, Northside lost a notary and somebody's getting trained, like for a 2-week period, they don't have a notary right now, and they're sending people to other branches. But by board policy, we're violating policy because it says that there's one available.
I think I think the staff really understands issues. But I think we've made a lot of progress.
And I think we covered what if no staff volunteers.
Oh, sorry, I missed a chat from Brittany saying agreed, Krista.
We can just think as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
All right, are we, is there any more progress we can make today, other than just taking this back and reviewing the transcript and trying to come up? I'm inclined to show up with a draft language that will be circulated in advance and just.
I think if we don't, we're gonna spend another.
Yeah, we're gonna do this. So that'll be the goal for next time.
Productive.
Yeah. Okay, but I think we have some good stakes in the ground to start from.
Okay.
Anything else for today then?
What's our next, what's the next thing the policy committee is gonna be tackling?
So
There's nothing else for this year.
There's not a required review,
Yeah.
for this calendar year.
Correct.
So we have 2 more meetings, so we'll
Finish this.
finish this, hopefully next month, but we'll see. And then, December might end up being this long-awaited rework of the policy manual, which really is just taking what's there and shuffling around in a more kind of digestible order, because right now it's just kind of random. And we've actually been laying the groundwork, like the work we did the last couple months, where we've consolidated a bunch of governance things into one. We've been doing that, and then there were some that were like very staff oriented, like disciplinary procedures. I don't know if that one survived, but a bunch of those we've been deprecating over the last couple of years. So the prep work has been happening.
There's less to work
Yeah,
with.
well, we've been prepping it, I think.
Okay.
But that might be what happens in December.
You-
All right, thank you, everyone.